I want to bring into the conversation now Colonel Cedric Leighton, U.S. Air Force retired and president of Cedric Leighton Associates. We're delighted to have you here in the studio, Colonel.
It's great to be here, Jonathan.
The point just on Bahrain for the moment, or the wider picture that Leland was just making, that a lot of this is about Iran. It's a point you've made many times.
Yes, and Leland is exactly right, because what Iran is trying to do is it's trying to foment rebellion not only in Bahrain, but they're also looking at the other Gulf Cooperation Council states. And the big prize for the Iranians is Saudi Arabia. The eastern province of Saudi Arabia is a Shiite majority area. It's also the richest area in terms of oil in Saudi Arabia, and because of that, that becomes the key area that the Iranians are going to be active in. And of course, geographically, it's on the other side of what we call the Persian Gulf, the Saudis call the Arabian Gulf. And so they could, in essence, create a little lake for themselves if they had enough restive populations in those areas that were beholden to the Iranian regime.
So this, for our viewers to understand it, this is a huge potential power play by Iran, by our sworn enemy in the Middle East.
Absolutely, because you've got the Bahraini situation, which is for them the low-hanging fruit. You have Saudi Arabia as a potential monarchy, but there are certain institutional weaknesses in that state. You have the other Gulf Cooperation Council states like the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, which is of course a huge U.S. ally, and so because of all of that, you have a situation where each and every one of those areas that the Iranians, if the Iranians could destabilize those, that then would wreak havoc on U.S. policy throughout the Middle East and potentially weaken the U.S. not only in that region but around the world as well.
All right, let's get to Syria in particular now. This UN plan to send in up to 300, but for now 30 monitors, peacekeepers, whatever you call them. It seems utterly pointless, is it?
It is. It is absolutely pointless, because in order to be effective from a military standpoint, you would, in my estimation, need at least 10,000 troops.
10,000?
10,000.
And they're going to send a maximum 300?
Yeah, you can't do that. You just can't do it. And it doesn't mean that the 10,000 are going to go and kick down doors unless they have to. What it does mean is that there will be a presence, a visible presence in each of the areas, such as Homs, Hamas, Idlib, and even Damascus. Those are areas that become really, really important if we are serious as a world in stopping the butchery that's going on in Syria. If we're not serious, then why should we even bother?
All right, we had this Friends of Syria meeting. We've had meetings in Istanbul. There was a meeting of foreign ministers in Paris yesterday, I think it was. One of our viewers here, Ulfa Jury, asking, what's the resolution out of any of these meetings? Are we getting anywhere?
Not really. I mean, it's good that the world has come together in its verbal condemnation of the Syrian regime. But the problem is there is no muscle behind it. And the fact that there's no muscle behind it creates a real problem, because, as Leland Vittert mentioned, the Syrian government can act with impunity as a result. And they don't see any consequences to their bad behavior. If they saw consequences to their bad behavior, that would be a totally different issue. And then you would see a reduction, an eventual reduction in the deaths of civilians.
What consequences can there be short of military action? Because nobody seems to have the stomach for that.
Right, and that's the problem. You compare Libya and Syria. People were willing to go into Libya. It was easier, quite frankly, to do from a logistical standpoint, from a military standpoint. In terms of what can we do? Well, if we're not going to go the military route, we're looking at a protracted standoff. But the sanctions route is probably the most feasible. Another possibility is a naval blockade of Syria. Now, again, that's a military option, but that is the closest.
Without boots on the ground.
Exactly, right. Without boots on the ground. And a third possibility would be a no-fly zone. That would then involve, if you did it right for Syria, would involve all of the major parts of the country, such as Damascus, the western spine, basically. That would be the area that we should look at.
But big risks there, purely because Syria has some pretty good air defenses.
It has some pretty good air defenses, some very good air defenses. However, they are a bit old. They come, from the Soviet era, and they've been built up in some ways since that time. They're somewhat similar to the Iraqi air defenses of Saddam Hussein.
One of our viewers here, Metal Chef, asking, in terms of Syria, what weapons of mass destruction, if any, do we know that it has?
We don't have a complete picture on that, but what we do know is that there is the possibility of chemical weapons in Syria. There was also a lot of movement from Iraq in the age of Saddam Hussein, just as he was losing power during during Operation Iraqi Freedom, the first stage of that, a lot of movement from Iraq into Syria. We don't know if there were chemical weapons from Iraq that went to Syria as a result of that. The Syrians are thought to have their own store of chemical weapons. There's also a possibility of biological weapons, and of course we all know that they were working on a nuclear program until the Israelis hit it in 2007.
All right. A couple of our viewers weighing in on Iran. Laurie, for instance, says, what can we really do to stop Iran? I don't see how we can ever stop them without boots on the ground. Sarah West says this is all one more reason to do something about Iran and do it now, in all uppercase letters, she says. And you've said that this is one of the sort of opportunities of Syria, if you like. If we tackle Syria, we can punch a big hole in Iran's strength.
Exactly.
How so? Exactly.
And the reason is it's basically Syria is a vulnerable player right now. Syria has been an Iranian ally since at least the early 1980s. And because of that, and there's also a religious connection, Alawites being Shia, Iran being Shia, if you take away the Syrians, that then leaves Iran basically friendless in the Arab world. And what that means is it cuts them off from Hamas, it cuts them off from Hezbollah, and cuts them off also from an arms conduit that they use on occasion to take arms from Russia into Syria that sometimes end up in Iran, and other times they go the other way. But Syria would be a huge blow to Iran's prestige, and that's why it's very important to do something against Syria. And then basically what you do is you strangle the Iranian regime by surrounding it, by encircling it, and that's without going boots on the ground. That's the idea.
All right, so Iran, as ever, the key to so much of this. All right, Colonel Cedric Leighton, U.S. Air Force retired, President Cedric Leighton Associates, a pleasure to have you in the studio with us, Colonel.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thanks so much for being here.